Washington turned up the heat on Iran again yesterday, announcing sweeping new sanctions against the Iranian Defense Ministry, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and 3 banks. In her announcement yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice also designated the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force as terrorists. Rice said the sanctions are Washington's answer to what the U.S. sees as Iran's threatening behavior.
Unfortunately, the Iranian government continues to spurn our offer of open negotiations, instead threatening peace and security by pursuing nuclear technologies that can lead to a nuclear weapon.
Joining me to analyze these recent developments is Babak Yektafar, Real News analyst and editor-in-chief of WashingtonPrism.org. Babak, how is Iran reacting to these new sanctions and to the thesis by Secretary Rice that Iran is just avoiding a reasonable conversation?
Well, it must be noted that what Secretary Rice called for, which is essentially she's saying that we would meet with Iranians anywhere, under any conditions, and on a wide range of topics important to both nations, really has a string attached to it, and that is a suspension of enrichment, uranium enrichment, which is the contentious issue between the two countries, essentially.
How effective are these sanctions actually going to be? Is it more a propaganda move, or will the sanctions actually harm the Iranian economy?
Well, from what I have seen, the sanctions have had some impact. I mean, there's no way that you can say that they have not had an impact. From what I've heard from some of the people that I've talked to in Washington, one of the aims, and it may not be the main goal, but definitely something as a side that the White House is hoping for, is the fact that these sanctions have created a division among the Iranian power structure. You have the so-called Ahmadinejad faction, which is more of a conservative and following the old line of Ayatollah Khomeini and the leader of the revolution, Iranian Revolution. You have the more pragmatic conservatives, which are led by Mr. Ali Larijani, who just resigned last week, and you have the more relatively conservative, but certainly more pragmatic of Rafsanjani. And there is massive division right now going on.
So the U.S. policy, the Bush administration policy, from their eyes, is achieving what they're trying to achieve?
They think that it is, and they're hoping that the more they ratchet up these sanctions, even though they may not have the desired effect, and let's face it, as long as other countries don't join in, Russia and China in particular, India and some other key players, I mean, sanctions are going to have limited impact. And Europe as well. I mean, even to this day, Germany and France, despite the rhetoric that comes out of those countries, they're still dealing with Iran. So unless it's a multilateral approach, the impact of sanctions in terms of changing the regime or even changing their behavior may not have the desired impact.
It's a very dangerous game of brinkmanship, and the question is who's going to blink first. Is U.S. policy strengthening people who might blink, or strengthening, in fact, the people who will never blink?
That's the key question. I mean, there's a lot that you hear that the more pressure that U.S. applies on Iran, the more it would help people kind of moving behind the more conservative factions. I'm not necessarily, I don't particularly believe that that's what's happening. I think people are extremely worried about what's going on, and Iranian people, that is, and they're extremely tired of what's going on. The biggest problem that I see is that because there is not really any kind of a direct contact right now between the two countries, all these kind of misperceptions and misunderstandings may trigger something that would have real dire consequences for both countries and the region itself. I mean, Iran keeps insisting that the U.S. does not have the capability of striking us, and sort of they're egging on the United States as well.
I mean, it seems the more the American government ratchets up the rhetoric and the sanctions, in fact, the less isolated Iran seems to become, in terms of Putin's comments opposing these sanctions, China's, even Canada refused to join in on these sanctions.
Well, yes. I mean, the trip that Putin took to Tehran last week is a very good example. I mean, for the first time after over 50 years, the president of Russia, or for that matter, the leader of the Soviet Union before the fall of the Berlin Wall, has traveled to Tehran, and of course Iranians made a big deal out of it. That there's certainly a division between the two countries, and they're definitely going to play the Russia card, as they call it. Even though I think the way Putin and Russia sees it, they're playing the Iran card. So I think most people believe that it's going to be extremely difficult to have Russia and China on board for a third UN resolution, and they're all waiting to see whether or not this recent development in terms of Iran and IAEA cooperating, what the result of that is going to be.